Congratulations on making it through the Smart Alec SAT and ACT workshop and series of seminars. You have now learned a fair amount about these two exams and gotten an overview of all the different sections of test prep as a whole. And in this last one, we want to go over the comparison between the exams and a few practical details about actually starting SAT or ACT prep with a student. And so you can see on the screen in front of you that we have our Smart Alec Diagnostic report. This is something that I designed, and my name, by the way, is Nathan Kane, and I'm the CEO here at Smart Alec. If you didn't already know that from our first meeting where we kicked off this series. So this is something that I built with my team here. And the purpose of this tool is to analyze student performance on a full-length SAT and a full-length ACT, and then provide a breakdown of their performance over many different question types, to provide a recommendation of which exam is a better fit for them. And we'll get into the details of what this report contains in a few minutes, but for now I just want to talk about how to help a student who comes to you as a tutor and asks you, which exam should I take? Or should I take both exams? So when a student is starting their test prep, most of the time they won't know whether they're going to want to take the SAT or ACT. A few will come in with an idea because maybe one of their friends did take a specific test, or they've heard some things about which exam is easier, but most people won't really know, and it can be one of the tutor's roles to help them make that decision. And there's some good ways to make that decision, and then there's some not so good ways. So let's take the scenario where a student comes to you and asks, which exam should I take, SAT or ACT? There's a few different ways you can help them figure out which one's going to be a better natural fit for them. And the best of those methods would be to take full-length diagnostic exams, which is what we offer here at Smart Alec. And so what that means is taking a full-length SAT and a full-length ACT, not on the same day, give them time to sit and take those, and they should take them under standard conditions, so with the actual timing. And then we can take their answers from those and run them through this diagnostic software that we have here and produce a report like the one you see in front of you. That is the best scenario, and that's good for obvious reasons. One, it gives them a clear indication of which exam is going to be a better fit for them, and it takes into account not only the question types of the exam and the way in which they ask the questions, but the endurance aspect of the exam that some of the other methods won't account for. So some of the other methods are the shortened diagnostic quizzes that take a few ACT style questions and a few SAT style questions, and we'll mash them up, and then students can knock that out in 20 minutes or so and get a recommendation. But that doesn't take into account the fact that these exams are of varying lengths, and the ACT is largely challenging because of timing, whereas that's not necessarily true for the SAT. So you really don't get the same level of accuracy with those mini diagnostic quizzes that you can find on some of the major test prep sites out there. A third way that you can help a student make a decision, though, it would be a academic personality assessment that you could conduct with them. And there are some key indicators that can give you a pretty good idea of which exam is better fit for a student. So there's a few things to look for here. One is just how fast are they when it comes to reading comprehension. As I was saying a moment ago, the ACT is really a test that focuses on timing. So for the math section, for instance, you have 60 minutes for 60 questions. For the English section, you have even less time per question. So you're really being asked to process a huge amount of information and move quickly from question to question. And because of that, the questions are easier, but you really have to manage your time well and be able to read quickly. So even the math section is to a large extent reading comprehension. And if you can't process information and figure out what they're asking you very, very fast, the ACT is going to be a really challenging test for you. But on the other hand, it's a lot more straightforward than the SAT. So the SAT, people often say, is tricky or a little less straightforward. And I think that is very much true, even with the changes they've made. So if a student prefers something that's just is very fast and prefers straightforward questions and answering a lot of them quickly, ACT is probably a good bet. If they like to have a little more time, then the SAT might be a better fit for them. Another thing to take into account is math skills. So on the SAT, your score is, you can see here, a little breakdown. Your score in here is going to be 800 points for the reading and writing sections and 800 points for math. So math accounts for half of your total grade. So if you know a student's going to be weaker at math, that's going to have a huge effect on their SAT score. Whereas with the ACT, you've got 4 sections that's going to all get averaged, that are all going to get averaged together to have a composite score that will be out of 36. So you can see in this example here, the math score is relatively low compared to everything else for the ACT, but their ACT score is comparatively higher because there's 4 sections. So it actually the SAT can penalize students who are worse at math compared to the ACT. So if you have a student who's really weak at math, ACT could be a good bet for them because that'll get less importance in the score calculation. Another thing to look for, a key indicator, could be a science phobia of some kind. So while both the SAT and the ACT can reference science, the ACT has a science section. And as you've heard by now, while it's not actually testing scientific knowledge, there's a lot of scientific terms, a lot of scary looking graphs and charts and experiments going on there. So the student's really scared of science and just feels like overwhelmed by just scientific terminology and language. That can be a good reason to choose the SAT over the ACT. One other thing to take into account is the calculator reliance that a student might have developed over the years when it comes to math, because the SAT has now a no calculator math section. So if your student really is clinging on to using their calculator for every single question, they can do that on the ACT, but they cannot do that on the SAT. So these are just some easy ways to help a student decide whether to take the SAT or ACT. I don't recommend using any of those. I recommend they do the full-length tests, the SAT and ACT. They're going to be putting in a lot of time to prepping for these exams, hopefully, and spending some money on tutoring and any other kinds of prep. And these exams have a huge amount of importance when it comes to deciding their college admissions, their future career opportunities, and their potential scholarship packages. So it's worth investing the 7 hours to do both exams so you can start prep on the right foot. Also, as a tutor, getting this report is just such a huge gift. It will give you a wonderful starting place to make your prep as effective as possible. So whenever possible, definitely try to get students to take these diagnostics, these full-length SAT, full-length ACT diagnostics. If it's not possible, you can go with the mini quizzes, or you can just help them make that decision based on those factors that I was going over. So at Smart Alec, we offer the diagnostic, the full-length diagnostics in a couple of different ways. We'll run them here in New York City every month or two. And then we'll also offer them anytime online through our website, where we have this set of video proctors where students can take these exams. We charge basically nothing for them, and they can get a consultation with one of our learning experts here. So we can not only send them the report, but we can pass that report along to you, and it's really quite affordable. So that's always an option. These just take you through these the timing of both exams, and I think that's a great way to get anyone started. So when they do that, hopefully you've convinced them of the importance of this, or we have, and they've taken both the SAT and ACT, as hopefully you have, as part of the requirements of this series of seminars. And you'll get a report like this. And so I want to go over how to think about it, how to analyze it, and how to help a student understand it. So I'll give you a second if you haven't already pulled up your report to do so. So you should have a report that you've gotten because you've completed both the SAT and ACT, sent in your answers, and we sent back to you. So if you haven't done that, you might want to pause this video, finish those tests, and email us, because this will be a lot more helpful if you can look on with your own example. But assuming that you figured out how the pause button works, I don't actually have to literally stop talking right here. So I'll continue, and we'll read our reports together. So this is a sample student report. You can see that it provides the SAT score and the ACT score, and it generates an automatic exam recommendation. So that is calculated using these three fields here, which are a product of a bunch of analysis that happens on the back end. So percentile difference refers to, based on your score on the SAT and ACT, what percentile that puts you in. So 1300 on the SAT may put you in, say, the 90th percentile. So it takes that 90th percentile, compares it to whatever percentile 29 would be on the ACT. So maybe that's the 95th percentile. And so it calculates a percentile difference. Comparative advantage uses another kind of score comparison translation to generate the comparative advantage. So how many points on the SAT your ACT score is worth more, if that makes sense. These always should be going in the same direction. One may be larger than the other, but as long as they're both in the same general direction, so positive, for instance, then you are pretty safe to say that the exam is, the recommended exam is actually accurate. And there's a few different levels of advantage. We have slight, significant, and very significant. So here, this is kind of a middle example where a student has a significant advantage on the ACT. So that means you probably want to take it pretty seriously. If there's a slight advantage, then I would ask the student which one they liked better and really take that into account, because that is also a super relevant factor here. If they really hate an exam, it's a great idea to let them have a choice. And so you're going to have a student who's much happier, much more effective prepping for an exam that they don't hate compared to an exam they do hate. So if that advantage is only slight, you can take that into account. And not that you shouldn't in other times, but for a student who's doing this much better on the ACT, you probably want to encourage them to take the ACT, even if they like the SAT a little bit more. So we can take a look at the overall comparison section here. So very simple, just this is what you got on the SAT, this is what you got on the ACT. Here are your section breakdowns. You can see we include national averages in there. And this should all be pretty self-explanatory now that you're all pros when it comes to these exams. And unlike the other seminars, because we're kind of going over documents that we all should have, and you might ask questions about it, if you have a question, just unmute yourself and ask me. That's totally fine. And I'm happy to address specific things. If it has to do with your specific diagnostic report and you think it won't apply to everyone else, just ask in the comments afterwards and we'll also address it there. But just wanted to let you know about that. So I'm going to move on to the more interesting details of this report. This is where we get into stuff that is really going to hopefully elucidate where our student needs more help. So section 2 is an analysis of a student's performance across similar question types. So what this means is that we've identified questions that are asked in a very similar way on the SAT and ACT. So within the reading part of the SAT and ACT, there's these 3 key question types that we think that these exams do a pretty good job of matching one another on. So author's intent, interpreting content, finding information. What's interesting about this student is if you look, they liked the way the SAT was asking questions more, at least if you take into account their performance. So they did better on the SAT's version of author's intent, interpreting content, and finding information questions when it comes to the reading. And that's not necessarily true over here when we get to the grammar. It's kind of a mixed bag here. When it comes to punctuation, they liked the ACT style better, and the same with word choice. SAT a little bit for verb error, but it's interesting to see the way these exams present these questions that are accessing the same kind of information, and how that can vary slightly even when they're really testing you on exactly the same thing. And some of this fluctuation will just be natural because it's not like we had this student take 10 different exams. So it's possible that you'll see these values change if we were to run this on another set of 2 exams they took. So this is definitely useful, but it's not statistically significant, across the student's performance forever. So here we can see their math. Their math is all over the place. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily super useful here. I mean, they do better on the SAT overall, but this student, as we'll see, and you can tell just from this initial performance evaluation, they're struggling most with math. So really their strong suit is in the reading, writing, and science, and in math they're definitely struggling a bit more. Now, section 3 is the performance on unique question types. So what that gives you an opportunity to look at is how do they do on certain question types that are simply not on one exam or the other. So for instance, how did they do on the no calculator question types, or the student produced response question types on the SAT in the math section. So you can see that they did okay, but again, math wasn't their strong suit, but they got only about half right in both these categories. So they didn't perform particularly well in the areas that are unique to the SAT. They did well on the ACT science section, however. So we can see that they performed, even though this graph makes it look like there's a large gap between the 40 and 35 here, really 35 out of 40 is quite good for the science. So it didn't seem like science tripped them up, and that's a good sign that the ACT might be a good exam for them, especially when we take into account that that was the recommendation that we saw in the beginning. So here you have their performance analysis, and these are all the different question types that we thought were salient and enough to be broken down into their own categories. And so we just can see where they lost points really quickly just by glancing at it. So they struggled with these supporting evidence questions, which I'm sure you learned about during the seminar. And these are really tricky. These are the questions where they're asking you to identify supporting evidence for the answer you chose in the previous question. And I think that students do struggle with these questions often. So that's definitely an area that they're going to need some work. And then we can see punctuation was an area where they were struggling, and word choice. So it gives you a really nice just overview of what you might need to work on with them. And so moving on, we can take a look at their no calculator performance. We see that algebra was difficult for them. And I should note that questions can be more than one thing. So a lot of questions are algebra questions. And it might be an algebra question that was also a no calculator question. So don't be scared if the total possible score adds up to way more than the total possible number of points you can get, or correct answers you can get on the math section. So some questions can be more than one type. So you could have a function and algebra question, for instance. But we can see the no calculator, which obviously has a lot of possible points, but that was definitely a problematic area, as was the exponents and radicals area. And we can look down here again. This is just a great way to see really quickly what they're struggling with the most. And same thing for the ACT. So you can take a look and see that punctuation is definitely an area where they are going to need some work. This is good to see on both the SAT and ACT because it means it's not how the exams are presenting, it is just that punctuation is an area where they're going to need to go over certain rules again. Algebra comes up again, functions comes up again, and we can go through their reading and science performance. If you have a situation like this where a student is clearly leaning towards one exam and you talk to them and they're on board, they're happy to take the ACT, you don't need to go over all the SAT stuff with them as well. So in your first session, you can just jump right to the ACT. We just wanted to package it like this so that you had all the possible information. So don't necessarily feel like you have to go through both exams if you've already made the decision with the student. Following the performance breakdown on both exams, you'll just get their answers and the correct answers and the points scored throughout the whole rest of the test. So you can see exactly where a student missed a question and make sure to go over that if you think it's relevant for the first session. So this report is 16 pages of powerful standardized test analysis, and so we hope we can really use it effectively to get right into understanding what your students need the most help with, how you can be the most effective as a tutor, and how you can help guide their prep as an ongoing and structured effort. So I wanted to also talk a little bit about what we're hoping for you as test prep tutors coming out of this seminar. One of the big things that makes test prep different from academic tutoring is the fact that you are really guiding them through this entire process. And so unlike academic tutoring, not that academic tutoring doesn't have an element of this, but in test prep, you really need to provide a structure for the student, and they need to feel like you are guiding them towards specific exam dates, and you have a plan, and you're going to help them cover everything they need to learn, so that when they take that exam for the first, second, and potentially third or even fourth time, you had a certain amount of intention with the lesson plan you had laid out. And you weren't forgetting anything, you were making sure that not only did they have all the content, but they also had the strategies, and they also had the opportunity to practice test taking and build that endurance that's so critical to doing well on these tests. So this report is a great way to start that, because it gives you a clear indication, hopefully, of whether to start with the SAT or ACT. One of the most common mistakes that we see tutors, but really more often students making, is switching between the two exams after already prepping for 7 or 8 weeks. Really, you want to make sure that doesn't happen, because nothing disrupts the prep and the build towards a successful exam date more than just deciding you're going to switch because it turns out these tests are hard, because they are hard and they're not that fun. And it's our job to make them as accessible and as fun as possible to an extent. So if you can have them take these exams, these diagnostic exams, and have a recommended exam like the ACT here, you can prevent that potential desire to switch once things sort of start getting tough a few weeks down the line, or a few months down the line, or after that first exam score comes back and it's not as big a jump as they would have wanted, because they're going to want to maybe change over to the other exam just because it seems easier, but it's not going to be easier. It's just kind of a false hope, and they hope they'll get lucky. So providing structure, providing a sense of support, allowing a student to trust that you know what you're doing and that you are actually guiding them with intention towards an outcome that's desirable to them. All these things are incredibly important when it comes to test prep. It's really about building a relationship and trust, and the best way to do that is to have a clear plan and to know your stuff. So especially, I said this at the beginning, but I'll say it again, especially for the first year you're doing test prep, never walk into a situation where you haven't already taken the entire exam and are not confident you can answer every question on that exam, and also explain why the right answer is the right answer. That's the surest way to get yourself, I don't want to say fired, but not booked again, is when you walk into a first session with a student and stumble on a math problem that you didn't notice or don't remember how to solve. It just undermines that confidence that they need to build in you so fundamentally that it can be almost impossible to recover. You have to be a test prep magician, and you can never sort of tip your hand that you're not absolutely perfect. Not to say you can't be relatable, but they need to feel like you absolutely have a clear sense of this test and both these tests and what's right for them. So take the tests before you sit down with a student. Know the plan that you have them on and communicate that to them clearly, and communicate it to the parent clearly. Assign homework, and that homework should include practice testing, so they really are building those skills of timing, of endurance. If there's a question type that you are struggling with in terms of actually teaching to a specific student, don't be afraid to reach out to us, or just look around the internet. There's so much good material out there about how to actually teach these different techniques and how to teach different or the same curriculum to different students, and to teach different strategies for approaching the same kinds of content for different students. So there's a ton of information out there. Don't be afraid to explore. There's some really wonderful resources, and we're always happy to recommend certain resources as well. Don't be afraid to try new techniques, to invent your own techniques. Don't be afraid to listen to your students. I had a student teach me the best technique I ever learned, and she didn't even know that she was doing something that was like completely innovative and changed the way that I taught the reading comprehension section forever. So I told her afterwards, because it made her feel good. And but it was an example where you just can learn a ton from the way that your students are actually already approaching the exam. So take all the lessons you're learning from your students, from your fellow tutors, from the internet, from prep books, and have fun with them. As long as you show up prepared and you are demonstrably caring about the outcomes that your students experience, you'll do a fantastic job. And I can say that with confidence, knowing that you're already a Smart Alec tutor. So this is going to conclude the SAT and ACT seminar, but I wanted to open it up again. If anyone has any questions, I'll hang out for 5-10 minutes. Be happy to answer them. If you have watched this video and you have not done your SAT and ACT and haven't gotten your diagnostic, please do that. We're not going to be able to approve you for the subjects unless you do that. We not only want to see that you can do the material, but also it's important to have the experience of taking these exams, and we wouldn't want you to walk into a first session without having taken the exams, as I've said probably like 8 times now between today and the first session. So you gotta do that, but they're not so bad. They can be a lot of fun. I personally love them, and I hope that you come to love them too. All right, well, I'll open up for questions now, but thanks so much for watching. And if you have any questions about your specific report, again, you can either ask now if you're live, or just ask in the comments, and we'll be happy to answer. Thanks so much.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so my question is, like, in the advantage portion, if it's insignificant and like the percentage for the comparative advantage is really low, is there like a test that you could recommend, or?
Yeah, so in that case, there's a really simple way to give a potential recommendation, which is just to ask the student which exam they enjoyed more or hated least. If there's not really a noticeable difference, then you might be in a situation where the student just simply liked one better, and that can make a pretty big difference in terms of their motivation. Or did you get a report where your your difference is insignificant?
Yeah, mine was like less than 1% for the comparative.
Gotcha. Did you enjoy one exam more than the other?
I don't know, actually. So, yeah.
No, not really.
Not
That's
really.
interesting. Well, it depends. So assuming that you did quite well on both, it might be a situation where you will probably do really well on either one. If you're near a 1600 and a 36, there frankly isn't going to be a huge difference. You want to look at exactly what you got wrong on both and see what subject that is and whether it was a silly mistake or whether it's something you have to learn. That can be a good indicator. Also, for the ACT, it can be tough to, if the way a student's losing points is just that they're running out of time. So if you're going to, say, the ACT answers and answer key, and you're looking at like the end of each section and seeing that maybe the student's missing like 5 or 10 questions there, that can be a good indication they're just running out of time because it's such a time-sensitive exam. So that's probably not what's happening to you, but if that's the case, you have to weigh, are they going to be able to learn the timing of the exam? Like, is it something they're going to be able to practice and speed up with? And a good way to assess that out is just, do they often run out of time on tests in school? Because if they do, it might be tough to get them to really fundamentally speed up in the relatively short amount of time that you have with them, versus the points they're losing that are comparable on the SAT, which might be because they haven't learned statistics or something. The statistics is not a huge portion of the SAT, but it's there, and so you could probably just teach them the couple concepts they need to know. So it might be a game of figuring out where the easier points are to get back. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Anybody else have a question? All right. Well, in that case, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you coming through this whole course with us, and we're excited to help a lot of students with the SAT and ACT this year. Always feel free to reach out. We're here to help, and yeah, thanks for all your hard work and all your hard work to come. Thanks for being with us.